you wake inside a tube no wider than a pencil. The walls around you are green, layered, fragrant, cut leaves curled into a perfect cylinder, sealed at both ends like a tiny scroll. You have no name for this place. You have never seen your mother. You will never see her. But she built this for you before she died, and every fiber of it was chosen. You stretch. The leaf walls give slightly. Outside, the world is warming. You can feel it through the silk-thin membrane of your skin. Somewhere, a flower is opening. You do not know what a flower is yet, but you will. You are not a caterpillar. You are not a maggot. You are something else entirely. Your body is segmented, pale, soft as a grain of rice. You breathe through tiny holes along your sides called spiracles, 10 of them paired, drawing in air without a single breath the way you understand breathing. Your jaws are already forming, small but precise, designed for a task you have not yet imagined. Around you, packed against the leaf walls, is a loaf of pollen and nectar your mother kneaded together over the course of nearly a week. She visited dozens of flowers: roses, clover, alfalfa, blueberry blossoms, wild bergamot, and on each one she somersaulted across the anthers, raking pollen into the dense golden brush on the underside of her abdomen. That brush is called a scopa. You'll grow one too if you are female. You eat, slowly, for days. The pollen is alive in a way bread is not. It carries the chemical signatures of every plant your mother touched. Botanists who have analyzed leafcutter bee provisions have found pollen from dozens of species in a single cell, a microscopic record of a landscape, sealed inside a leaf. You're not just eating food, you're eating a map. Step back. That was you. For the last 60 seconds, you were a leafcutter bee larva, sealed in a brood cell at the back of a hollow plant stem, or inside an old beetle tunnel, or in a crack in a fence post, or in one of the slim cardboard tubes a gardener placed against a sunny wall in early spring. There are over 1,500 known species of leafcutter bees in the genus Megachile, and roughly 140 of them live in the United States and Canada. They are native. They were here long before honeybees, which were brought from Europe in the 1620s. And the perfect, almost laser-cut semicircles you've been finding on your rose leaves, your redbud, your lilac, your bougainvillea, the ones you blamed on caterpillars, on beetles, on disease, on something that needed spraying, those are not damage. Those are nursery walls. Now imagine living the life I just described. 6 weeks of darkness inside a leaf scroll, eating a loaf your mother spent her whole short adulthood assembling. Then a winter of frozen stillness. Then one warm morning, you chew your way out into a world she will never see. Here is why this perspective shift matters. For most of the last 100 years, agricultural science treated pollination as a service performed by one species, Apis mellifera, the European honeybee. Almond growers in California rent 2 million honeybee colonies every February. Entire economies of pollination depend on hives that can be trucked across continents. But quietly, in the background, entomologists kept noticing something strange. On crop after crop, a small handful of native solitary bees were outperforming honeybees per visit, sometimes by an order of magnitude. Leafcutter bees are among them. A single female alfalfa leafcutter, Megachile rotundata, is estimated by USDA pollination researchers to do the work of roughly 20 honeybees in an alfalfa field. She does not store honey. She does not store honey. She has no queen. She is, by every measure that mattered to industrial agriculture, invisible. And she is cutting your leaves to raise the next generation of her. Once you see this, really see it, you cannot unsee it. The hole in the rose leaf is not a wound. It is a blueprint executed. Fact 1. Step back into her body for a moment. You are an adult female now. You have emerged from your leaf cell, mated within hours, and you are searching, not for food first, for a tunnel, a pre-existing cavity, because you cannot dig. Your jaws are scissors, not shovels. You investigate the hollow stem of a dead raspberry cane. You measure it with your antennae, walking in, walking out, turning, re-entering. If it is too wide, your young will be vulnerable. If it is too narrow, you cannot turn around inside it. You are looking for a diameter of roughly 6 to 8 millimeters and a depth of at least 10 centimeters. Step back. What you've just witnessed is one of the most underappreciated acts of engineering in the insect world. She's performing site selection with criteria a structural architect would recognize. Fact 2. Back into her body. You have chosen your tunnel. Now you fly to a rose bush. You land on the edge of a young, supple leaf, never an old leaf, never a told leaf, never a tough one. You braced your 6 legs. You arch your abdomen, and then in a motion that lasts about 7 seconds, you cut. Your mandibles work like curved shears, scribing an arc through the leaf tissue. You rotate your body as you cut, using your own length as a compass. When the disc detaches, you are already airborne, holding it beneath you like a tiny green sail. Step back. High-speed footage shows that a leafcutter bee can cut and carry a leaf disc nearly equal to her own body weight in flight, for distances of up to 300 meters back to her nest. There's no other insect on Earth that uses leaves this way at this scale. Fact 3. Back inside. You arrive at the tunnel. You crawl and head first, then turn, somehow, in a space barely wider than your body, and you press the leaf into place, shaping it against the curved walls. You make about 15 of these cuts for a single brood cell. Some are oval for the long walls, some are circular for the cap. Each shape is cut to fit a specific position. You are not cutting randomly. You are following a template encoded in your nervous system, refined across roughly 125 million years of evolution. Step back. Bees, in the broader sense, are believed to have diverged from predatory wasps in the mid-Cretaceous, around the time flowering plants were diversifying. Leafcutters are an ancient lineage within that story. Fact 4. Inside her body again. The cell is built. Now you provision. You fly out again and again, sometimes 30 or 40 trips, gathering pollen on your belly brush and nectar in your crop. You return, you regurgitate, you pack, you knead. When the loaf is the right size, about the size of a grain of rice, you lay a single egg on top of it. Then you cut another leaf disc, perfectly circular this time, and you cap the cell. Step back. You will repeat this process 6 to 10 times in a single tunnel, building a row of sealed nurseries like beads on a string. You will lay female eggs at the back, where they are safest, and male eggs near the front, where they will emerge first in spring and wait for their sisters. Sex allocation. Spatial strategy, done by an insect with a brain the size of a poppy seed. Fact 5. Back inside. You have 1 summer, maybe 6 weeks of adult life. You will never meet your offspring. You will never see the leaves you cut grow back. And they do grow back, because you did not damage the vascular system of the plant, only its margin. Studies of rose and redbud foliage cut by leafcutter bees show negligible impact on plant health. The plant continues photosynthesizing. The plant continues blooming. The plant in many cases is being pollinated by the very bee that is cutting it. Step back. Think about that exchange. She takes a sliver of a leaf. She returns pollination services worth, by some agricultural estimates, tens of billions of dollars globally, when extrapolated across all native solitary bees. The ledger is not even close to balanced. The plant is being paid in full with interest in the same currency it evolved to spend. Fact 6. Inside again. Winter is coming. You are dead. But inside the tunnel, your daughters and sons are alive, sealed in their leafy chambers, slowing their metabolism almost to nothing. They are not asleep. They are waiting. They feel the temperature drop. They feel the moisture shift. They feel the day-length change through cues no scientist fully understands. And when spring returns and the soil warms past a precise threshold, they chew. They chew through the leaf cap their mother cut for them 10 months earlier, a cap that has held through ice, through rain, through every fungal spore that tried to enter, and they emerge. Step back. The leaf walls are antimicrobial. Researchers studying Megachilae nest linings have found that certain leaves chosen by certain species contain compounds that inhibit mold and bacteria. She is not just wrapping her young in greenery, she is medicating them. Fact 7. One last time. Inside. You are emerging now. You are the daughter. You push through the leaf cap into a tunnel still littered with the dried remains of your sibling cells. You crawl forward. You reach the opening. The light, for the first time in your life, hits your compound eyes. You do not pause. You fly. And somewhere, on a leaf you have never seen, a perfect green semicircle is about to be cut by you, the same way it was cut by every mother in your lineage going back further than any human story. Step back. That right there is what is happening in your yard. Right now, in June, in July, in the warm corner of the garden you walk past on the way to your car. And maybe that is not so different from what you do. You too were built by someone you cannot fully thank. You too were sealed in a small warm place and fed by a body that gave up part of itself to assemble you. You too were given a template, a language, a culture, a set of instincts, and sent out into a world that the giver would not get to see you live in. The leafcutter bee does it in 6 weeks. We do it across decades. but the architecture is the same. A small chamber, a loaf of inheritance, a door carefully sealed, and then, one day, a chewing through. When we mistake her for a pest, we are not just misreading an insect. We are misreading the act of provisioning itself. We are misreading the act of provisioning itself. We are mistaking care for damage. I think about that every time I see one of those neat green discs missing from a leaf. I think about the female, somewhere within 300 meters, packing a loaf for a daughter she will never meet. And I think about how many of those daughters never make it because someone somewhere sprayed. So now I am going to ask you to close your eyes for 10 seconds and be her again. You are inside the tunnel. You are pressing the last leaf disc into place. The seal is forming. The egg is laid. Your work for this cell is done. There are 5 more cells to build before the summer ends. You do not know if you will live long enough to finish them. You fly out into the light anyway. 10 seconds. Be her. Now come back. The next time you walk past a rose bush, or a redbud, or a lilac, and you see one of those perfect semicircles, do not reach for the spray. Do not even reach for a pair of scissors to prune. Just stand there. Look at the edge of the cut. Notice how clean it is. Notice that nothing chewed it. Notice that it was scissored by a creature with a wingspan smaller than a postage stamp who needed exactly that shape to build a wall. Tell me in the comments what you saw. Tell me which leaf. Tell me which corner of which garden. Tell me if you have ever found one of her tunnels. In a hollow stem, in an old fence, in a bee hotel you forgot you put up 3 springs ago. Close your eyes for 10 seconds and be her again. Then come back and tell me what you felt. Because next time, you will not be a creature. There will be something in your house that you have walked past every day. Something you assumed was empty, or dead, or just decoration, and you will not believe what it has been doing while you slept.